Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to another Lens session. Today we're hosting Mallory and Michaela from WIID. Just a quick reminder to everyone here. We do have a code of conduct, so if you need to refamiliarize yourself with what that is, you can check it out on the Advanced Design website. Just be respectful and we'll be all good. So first things first, I'm going to introduce Mallory and Michaela. So our next guests on Lens are Mallory Evans and Michaela Barber, industrial designers, graduates from Purdue University, and founders of Women in Industrial Design. Mallory works as a product designer for Weber Grill, the world's premier manufacturer of charcoal, gas, and electric grills and accessories. She believes that the intersection of technology and human emotion is true innovation. She uses her background in ID to help push the boundaries of IoT products, designing intuitive customer experiences for everyday appliances. She believes the success of a product is directly related to the diversity of the product team making it. Michaela Barber is an industrial designer and design strategist at Beyond Design, a strategic product development firm in Ravenswood neighborhood of Chicago. As a design consultant, Michaela has had the opportunity to work on a variety of products, ranging from audio equipment to appliances for clients such as Yamaha, Instant Pot, and Zebra Technologies. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to these two amazing people. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. To give you some context, I'm Michaela.
I'm Mallory.
Hopefully you can see our screen in just a second. Oh, wrong button. Hang on. There we go. Okay. Can everybody see our screen? Miranda, you might have to tell us.
Perfect. It looks good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so thanks for that introduction, Miranda. Like we said, I'm Michaela. This is Mallory, and we're the founders of Women in Industrial Design Chicago. We're also practicing industrial designers ourselves. And when Advanced Design asked us to come and talk about pretty much whatever we wanted, we started talking about some of the things that were important to us, and not only us as design professionals, but also as women and founders of this organization. And we decided that something that isn't talked about enough that we wanted to address is imposter syndrome. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And also, we hope this can be super conversational. We are very chill people, and this can kind of be a heavy topic sometimes. So we're hoping that we're able to just have a conversation with you guys. We're going to be telling some stories of our own experiences. And we also did some research in preparation for this talk that we're going to be going over too. So hopefully we'll have lots of questions and things to talk about at the end. Okay, so the first thing that we want to talk about is just what the definition of imposter syndrome is. Like I said, we did a lot of research in preparation of this, just so we were a little more informed. Obviously, we have our own experiences of imposter syndrome, but this is one of the definitions we found that we really liked and really resonated with us, that imposter syndrome is the idea that you're only successful because of luck and not due to anything that you've actually accomplished or your talents. So this idea that like you're only in the room because you're lucky to be there, and it's not actually because you deserve to be there. And for us as designers and as people that have experienced this, we thought this was an especially resonating definition. So just to give you some history, the term imposter phenomenon, so it actually wasn't called a syndrome at first, it was coined as a phenomenon, was developed by these two psychologists in 1978. So in terms of history, it's a relatively new term, but these two psychologists did a lot of research into this idea that initially their thought was high achieving women had a really hard time accepting that they were successful because of their own merit. And then since then, they've discovered that it isn't something that only affects women, although women and minorities, in our opinion, are individually affected by imposter syndrome. But since then, research has shown that imposter syndrome can affect anybody, and it applies to anybody who isn't able to internalize their own successes. And then as we were doing research for this as well, we came across some really interesting ideas that we wanted to share with you guys as well about the context of imposter syndrome and how not only the word syndrome has a specific connotation with it, but also this idea that it might be being misdiagnosed. So we came across some articles. We have some sites at the end if you guys want to read more about this. But we came across these articles that were talking about how the word syndrome is also kind of misrepresenting the larger problem that imposter syndrome could pose, because syndrome indicates that there's something wrong with you. It like makes you think of these connotations of how people used to call women hysterical and things like that, which, as we now know, is not a fair term. So we were doing a little more digging into this, and we found that imposter syndrome is especially prevalent in biased, toxic cultures that value individualism over the individual person. And as working design professionals, this really resonated with us, because I think something that we've observed in our time in the industry is that there's a culture within the design industry that really values this type of work. And so it's something that we've seen through our experiences as well. And it was really interesting to see other people doing research into this. And another thing that we found is that stereotypes and microaggressions feed into this fear. So it, like we were saying about it affecting women and minorities specifically, things like stereotypes and microaggressions that also affect those groups of people feed into this idea of imposter syndrome. And ultimately, it just kind of fosters that type of a culture. And also calling it an imposter syndrome feeds into this idea that it's up to the individual to deal with it. So if you feel like an imposter, it's up to you to figure out how to make yourself not feel like an imposter, how to get around that. But ultimately, it's more of a systemic issue. And that's what the stereotypes and the microaggressions are pointing to, is the fact that those are creating a culture which allows imposter syndrome to exist, and that it puts the blame on the individual. So we're letting the culture and these workplaces that exist, we're kind of letting them off of the hook by perpetuating this imposter syndrome. So I know we just started this off like really heavy, but I think it's important to talk about in the context of imposter syndrome that it's not an individual issue, even though it's something that makes you feel like you're alone. It's not an individual issue. It's something that's really systemic. And some of the things that are contributing to imposter syndrome are actually things that go to the bigger picture, not the individual. So this was one quote that we really liked in some of the research that we've done, that overcoming imposter syndrome requires fixing the Eurocentric, masculine, and heteronormative system that makes it possible. And this, again, brought us back to our experience as designers working in industry that is especially Eurocentric, masculine, and heteronormative, on top of a culture and society that is also those things. And so if you take the Venn diagram of those things and put them together, you basically get a circle. And so it's just all of these layered effects that we think as designers and industrial designers working in this field, imposter syndrome is something that affects us in somewhat of a unique way. So ultimately, what that kind of led us to is this idea that we need to fix this system and stop letting imposter syndrome be used as a scapegoat, and really addressing the root of the issues of the system, doing things like hiring and promoting diversity, stopping cancel culture, changing this mindset that we have that you have to work like crazy until you die. The system that we see not only in the United States, our society, and also in the design industry as well. But dismantling a system is really hard, and it takes a lot of time and work and people dedicated to it. And we know that it's not realistic to expect the system to change overnight. And so all of that to say, we also want to talk about our experiences dismantling imposter syndrome within ourselves, and share some stories of things that we've come up against, and also some ways that we've been able to overcome it within ourselves. So I just talked a lot. I'm going to let Mal talk for a little bit.
So everything we're about to be is hot, which is humble, open, and transparent. It's something that we really try to include in how we talk to our friends and community, and how we're going to be talking with you guys. We think it just lets you see how human you are and allows a lot of grace to come into the conversation.
So there are a lot of times that we feel like imposters, especially recently. These are just some of them, including in preparation for the talk that we're giving right now. That's part of the reason we wanted to do research and get some other opinions into the mix as well. But literally, like, we've experienced imposter syndrome, and we have imposter syndrome talking to all of you about it right now. So I think, like, the first thing that we need to say is you're not alone if you feel like this. Everybody feels like this. We formed an organization for women in industrial design, and sometimes we still don't even feel comfortable talking about our experiences as women in industrial design.
Which we identify in every single one of, like, we are women, we are industrial designers. I feel like there was another point, I don't know, but like, I still am like, I know that I technically fit that identity, but like, am I allowed to like talk about my experiences, which just shows the level of like imposter syndrome that we literally navigate every day of our lives.
Yeah, I think some other just examples that we felt recently, one of the big things is at work. We're both working professionals, and even still in our jobs that, you know, we got hired out for a reason we're confident in, sometimes you still feel like an imposter. So one example, Mal and I have actually, we're not only friends and founders of this organization, we've actually worked together professionally before too. And we were working on a project a couple months ago that it was a very interesting project. The product itself was this extremely industrial product that we had to go through like weeks of training to even learn how to use it. And then we were going to be running a sort of like focus group brainstorm for the client. And we were already kind of feeling a little bit like imposters walking into this room, just because it's not our company. This is a new client. We're trying to like wrap our heads around what this is.
It's like, I think it's important to note too as well that like the product that we normally, I think when we think product design or industrial design, we think smaller scale systems. This was a large scale operational system. So it had a physical, it had a smart IoT component, it had like, I don't know, I think it was a little bit more than like normally we were used to walking into. As far as like ID product, like you cannot sketch, we'll put it this way, you cannot sketch this on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
The product.
Yeah, so we were already feeling a little bit like out of our depth at this moment, but trying to go into this room confidently. And we actually had an instance where the client called us out for being young. And we had to come up against this situation where we're like, we already feel like we can't do this job a little bit. And now you're insinuating that you think we can't do this job. And it's like, but we still have this job to do, and we have to do it well, and we have to do it confidently. And so it's just like, how do we deal with that situation? I think another example is job applications. When you're trying to apply for a job, and I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote us on this, but there's some statistic about like if a man reads a job application and he has 100% or 60% of the requirements, he'll apply, whereas a woman will, if she doesn't have 100%, she won't. And it's this idea of, you know, we've just felt like imposters.
That like I feel like what would always happen is like I would read a job description, and like the description part I was like, yes, that's me, say more, like say less, I got this. Like I would be like, I'm on this. And then you know, get to the qualifications and it would be like, I mean, on it to speak completely transparently, the job I'm in right now, the qualification said 8 to 10 years, and I was like, not me. So then I immediately just didn't apply. Through a turn of events, a headhunter recruits me for the position, and I get the job, which just goes to show that like if you were to be out, like if you didn't take yourself out of the race for not meeting a qualification, you could potentially have the job that you read the description and thought, wow, that's the best job in the world.
Yeah,
that's just crazy.
Some other places that we personally have felt like imposters is on Instagram. So I'm sure all of you know, there is a design culture on Instagram of super sexy renders and super great sketches and things like that. And that's amazing. Like, we love that people are practicing and showing their skills and things like that. But as professionals, we also know that's not what you do at work every day. And so it's like, when we're at work doing things like quick sketches to figure out a problem or solve something, and then you go on Instagram and you see a whole feed of super nice sketches, it just like puts this thought in your head of, well, that's not what I did today. So am I really like
a good designer?
Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing to like get the next job and like be the best designer that I can be? And all of these things are just so cyclical.
Or like they'll put, like, you'll see someone with like 20 prototypes and you're like, oh my gosh, I only did 3 prototypes, even though the scope of the project was 3 prototypes, and you're being a good business professional by staying within the scope and not going above business means. You're not going outside of your budget. It's funny how like those situations, you'll look at Instagram and be like, well, they had 20 prototypes, even though you don't know the story, and they're probably like, it's probably like a fun project. They don't even have a scope, but you're like so quick to be like, oh, well, they're better than me because they have 20 prototypes and I have 3. When none of it is real. Well, it's real, but none of it's 2 different scenarios that have nothing to do with how good or not good you are. There's no basis for that.
So anyway, all of that to say, no matter who you are or what job you're in or how many years of experience you have, you most likely experience imposter syndrome. And so we want to talk about some of the things that we personally do to help ourselves and help each other overcome this. So one of the first things is believing that you're the designer that you want to be. So I know personally with my friends, if one of us texts each other and they're like, this job sounds great, like I really want to apply, but there's this thing holding me back, like I necessarily don't have the years of experience that they're looking for, or there's one specific thing, the response is always channel the person that you want to be, channel the person that would apply anyway, channel the person that is confident enough to say, like, maybe you have 1 year less experience than they're looking for, but apply anyway, because you never know what's going to happen.
Ultimately, like, it's not, you're taking away the decision for them to even choose you by not applying. Like, by not even putting yourself in the race, you're taking out the ability for you to even win the race. So like, put yourself in the race, because if it's no that way, right? If you don't enter the race, it's a no. So why wouldn't I rather try and get a verbal no and cry about it later and then get your no?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, just go for it. Channel the person that you want to be and do what they would do for those positions.
One of our mentors told us, you're never going to get what you want if you don't ask for it. And so that's something we try and think about a lot. It reminds me of a story again. We gave a talk at the International Design Conference, the one IDSA puts on a couple years ago, and we applied on a whim a little bit. We were like, they're never going to let us on stage.
We were like there was some liquid encouragement. There was a minor liquid encouragement in the scenario. We were laughing because we were like, oh, there's no way that they'll do it. Yeah. They'll never let us on stage.
To talk about microaggressions and diversity in design. They're never going to let us do that.
And it will be really funny. And then they chose us.
Yeah. And they never would have done that if we wouldn't have gotten up the courage to apply to talk about that. Yeah. I think another thing that's really important to us is finding your tribe. So finding people within the community, either in the design community or otherwise, that support you and know who you are, can speak to that and help you when you don't feel like you're that person. So I know between Mal and I, because we're good friends as well, when one of us is feeling imposter syndrome, it's just like, here are all of these affirmations that I'm going to text you because I know you and I know the designer that you are. And it's important also because, I mean, this is something that's said time and time again, you can't go somewhere that you don't see someone that looks like you. It's much harder to get to a place if you don't see someone that looks like you can't see yourself in that position. And so having people around you and even people above you and mentors and things like that, people where you can look up to them and see yourself in those people, and they can remind you of the things that you don't always remember that you are, is really important as well. And just having a community around you that can help you with that.
Yeah. And I know like something that we do, she touched on it, was self-affirmations, but you have to realize like the core of what is happening is that by thinking it's luck, you're not giving yourself enough credit. Like you have earned everything up until what has happened to you. You have what you've lived through 100% of your worst days. You have woken up the next day. You have taken on what was given to you. And so you have to give yourself credit. And so, yeah, like we literally have lists of affirmations that we give each other that like, it helps like rewire your brain. And then it becomes a little easier to be like, no, I am consistent. I am a good designer. I am a good, just saying things like that. It helps rewire your brain. And you're like, yeah. And then the next time a big problem comes, you're like, okay, I can do this. You don't have to show up like, I got this, but like just saying like, yeah, I can start to tackle this. It's like an ice pick. You just chisel it away little by little, and then you're able to tackle bigger and bigger problems as they come on.
That reminds me of something my grandma always tells me.
I'm sorry.
She's like, Michaela, how do you eat an elephant?
One gulp.
One bite at a time.
No, I'm like a snake.
I think the other thing that's also important to remember is that it's okay not to know something. Like you're never gonna walk into a room and know 100% of the things. Like as a design consultant, I've never walked into a room and have designed the thing that I'm about to be expected to design. And that's just part of what you have to do, is like you have to rely on the skills that you have and things like the design process, and know that it'll help get you through whatever this project is too. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to admit that you don't know something. I don't know if you want to tell the story of your
Wait, which part of it? Wait, just
your interview.
Yeah, so like so kind of back to that earlier anecdote. I'm interviewing for the position, and I'm very aware that I do not meet many qualifications. Like I'm very aware of it. And to me, it's like this huge elephant in the room. Like I'm going through these interviews and I'm like, hey, yeah, like, let me tell you about this project. Let me walk you through my portfolio. And it's like this glaring, untalked about thing of like, are we just not going to talk about all the ways that you don't meet the qualifications on this paper? And so I hope this is the story you were talking about. And then, so yeah, it's like during the interview, I honestly just, they said like, do you want to talk about anything? And I was like, yeah, can we talk about how I don't meet some of these requirements? And like, what are your hesitancies on this? What are you worried about? And like, can I have the opportunity like that we can talk about this? Because I'm confident in my ability to show up. I'm confident in my ability to find an answer. I'm confident in my ability to learn and grow with your company, even though it might not be seen on paper. And because of that, the interviewer was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, wow. And I was like, oh, wow, great. It worked out really well. We were able to talk about maybe some different things and find common ground. Okay, so this is now how they've revised their expectations of the role. This is where we're going to be coming in. And it just created a lot of great communication around the role itself, expectations, growth opportunities. And it gave me a really good path to know, oh, okay, so if this is what they're looking for, now I can go back in my free time and think, how can I become what they were looking for?
Yeah, I think it was really great too that like it was just a transparent conversation you were able to have with them, and then you don't leave the interview with them still having hesitations. You give yourself an opportunity to say, you may have these hesitations, here's how I would respond to that.
Yeah, and I think too, like that whole interview process, I know you were talking, you've also done this. I was like, when they asked me like, have you done this? I was like, no. And I remember this, I was in one meeting and like this guy kept asking me like, can you do this? And like, I was like, nah, nope. No. Like I've done it for like 2 hours. Like, oh yeah, I've opened that program before. I'm kind of joking right now, but you know, in a very professional manner, I was like, yeah, no, like I don't, but that again, that level of transparency allowed conversation to say, you know what, no, I haven't done that, but cross pollination, right? What have I done that I can speak into this situation and validate those experiences? Because yeah, you don't always know the answer. You don't know what's going to, even if you've been in this job for 10 years, the industry is changing so quickly. I don't know that anyone can confidently say, I'm going to know how to tackle 100% of the problems that are put in front of me the next month. Because if you did, I would look at you at, like, if a CEO of a company said that to me, I wouldn't believe them, because how did you handle quarantine? Don't tell me. Like, there is no way to prepare for every situation in life.
And to me, when I'm looking to hire someone too, it's like, well, I would rather you have good problem solving skills and be able to figure things out that you don't know, as opposed to knowing everything, because you're never going to know everything.
Yeah. Once you accept that, life is real easy.
Yeah. And I feel like for me personally, I have a greater imposter syndrome when I've like kind of cheated the truth about how much I know something versus just saying like, I don't know. I know that I can learn it. I don't know it right now though. And so I think it's just like, we found in general, not only with imposter syndrome, but just with life, like being open and transparent about things actually opens up the door for other people to be open and transparent as well. I feel like we got a little off the rails.
Wow, we did, but it's cool. We're coming back. We're coming back.
And then the last thing that we want to talk about before we just open this up to conversation with you guys is something that we were thinking about as we were talking about preparing for this presentation. And it's actually how imposter syndrome affects us as designers versus potentially other people. Obviously, like, we don't work in other industries, so we can't speak to those experiences, but our experiences as designers, because design is a subjective field, it almost feels like this added layer of imposter syndrome on top of what you might feel in another position, because it's like, you don't know always what they're looking for. There's not always a right or wrong answer. And so it's like, because it's so subjective, you can feel like you don't know what you're doing. But then we started to change our mindset about that a little bit and think about, what if you could actually use the idea of imposter syndrome as an asset in your job? And so thinking about like what I do as a design consultant, like I said, I've never walked into a room and designed the thing that I'm about to design, but it's always worked out. And when we think about like companies that might be hiring a design consultant or hiring a new person to bring on, a lot of times it's because they're looking for a fresh take on what they're doing. The people that have been there are probably really great at their jobs, but like if you're working at a kitchen utensil factory, they've probably thought of already all of the ways that they can think of to do a kitchen utensil. And so they're looking for someone to come in and be like, well, but what if we did this instead? And it's like, this idea that you're an imposter could actually be an asset. The fact that you don't know all of the answers can actually be an asset, and it can bring some ambiguity into the situation or into the product that might not have existed there before.
Well, I think something else, imposter syndrome, I level with this as a female that has emotions that I express frequently. But like that, you can also just look for opportunities to reframe the question when you're feeling imposter syndrome. And so like my very current position, I enter a lot of meetings where they're like, oh, we need to make a better grill. And so that's how they're thinking. And I'm very new to this, right? Like I think I'm like 7 weeks, imposter. I'm like 7 weeks in. And I have to think, you know, I don't know what makes a better grill, because I don't even know what's good grill. I don't know good grilling practices, so I can't tell you what makes a better grill. But what I can ask you, and what helps with driving conversation, is what makes you feel confident when you're cooking? Now that I've reframed the question into something that I feel confident answering, now we have a common ground that we can talk about things and then translate it back to the original like problem solving, whatever it was, like at our feet. So being able to come in and like, okay, so how can I use what I don't know, which is literally anything about grilling? What's an adjacent problem area around that, right? Cooking in the house. Great. Okay. So I know cooking in the house. How do I feel comfortable and confident cooking in the house? This way. So then, using, like, a lot. You're a human. You've experienced a lot of days, 360 times your years, right? Like, you've experienced a lot. So, like, just don't discount yourself. Use what you know and see how you can apply it to those situations. And like, I think you would be amazed, because like when I do that, the room opens up, because now you're working on emotion, right? So I say confident, which wasn't in the equation before. I'm bringing emotions into a statement that before was purely product focused.
It's also very user centric to think about it that way, which is like who we're designing for anyway.
And like, because everyone wants to feel like the goal state is confidence. Like, you want to like lift open whatever you're cooking and everyone be like, oh my gosh, you should be a chef, right? Like, that's what you want. Like, I want you to cook for me again. I can't wait to come back over. So if you can frame out the emotions of what your goal state is, I'm guessing you can probably problem solve through this.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it doesn't matter what you're designing, because everyone has emotions.
Yeah.
So you're basically an expert at emotions, and leverage that.
Yeah. Basically, we think there's this very big opportunity to turn imposter syndrome that seems like a wall or seems like a barrier. And as designers, we can take that and turn it into opportunities and questions and innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot.
Yes.
These are some more things. We'll post this in the chat also. These are just some of the articles that we were reading to do some of the research we were talking about at the beginning. This one is also an imposter syndrome quiz if you want to take it. We both scored very badly. But if you want to read some more about some of the things we were talking about with like what imposter syndrome is, the history of it, some of the systemic things that we talked a little bit about, we'll post these in the chat. But also, first of all, thanks for listening to us ramble. And we would love to just have a conversation with you guys about questions or how you've experienced and overcome imposter syndrome. Really anything.
I don't know if we can bring back Miranda.
I don't know if we can share.
Yeah, I think if you two stop sharing, maybe we can open it up and we can see everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can see this too.
That was incredible. We've got some good questions. So Katerina Rizzoni, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and chat with us and ask your question?
Wow, you guys are so pretty. Everyone is so pretty today.
You guys are too.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or situations?
Oh, Kat, we can't hear you. Do you want me to read your question for you? Okay, so Kat asks, how do you balance acknowledging privilege that helped get you where you are with that confidence in yourself? I think that's a great question.
That is a great question.
Yeah. That is honestly that is what I'm currently working through. Because if you do not recognize your privilege of, I am a white, I'm like learning how to say everything, white cis woman. So I have to take into account of all the privilege I get when I walk into a room. And honestly, I don't know, I do it just by keeping myself humble. Truthfully, my faith plays a large part in this, because I believe in my soul that all humans are everyone just has such a unique storyline that they I think every human brings such a powerful energy into a room. So that's personally how I guess I work with that, because I'm I gotta shut up because my energy sucks compared to their energy. So I need them to speak louder.
I think with privilege in general too, not only acknowledging it, but amplifying other people. I mean, this doesn't just go to imposter syndrome, obviously, but in any situation, if you can amplify people that aren't being heard, especially if you have a voice, that's obviously extremely important to do as an ally. And I think a big part of imposter syndrome, we talked a little bit about finding your tribe and finding people like being allies to people as well. And, you know, obviously like this whole systemic idea of imposter syndrome goes back to the fact that there is privilege that exists. And so in order to get rid of the system that makes imposter syndrome possible, we also have to acknowledge that we have privilege and start to dismantle the things that continue to enable us to have privilege, if that made sense.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like I like to always give practicals. We're very practical people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. It'd be something where, okay, so I know at one point in my career, I think this works. I hope so. We're really going like ad-libbing here, you guys. At one point in my career, the company I was with was hiring someone. I had a boss turn and look at me. It happened to be a female designer. She, like, her human form was petite. And so he commented on her not being able to perform the job due to the size of her body. And it was like, well, she's a small person. Would she be able to perform the job? And immediately, right, like you have, that is and she was also a woman of color. There was a lot of like layers, right, that like I believe systemically went into that comment.
Yeah.
And so using your privilege in that would be going and saying like, can you explain to me the correlation between the size of someone, of how they appear in the physical world, and their ability to complete a job when we're not in a labor intensive situations? You know, like how do you say that, right? And I mean, I said it, and then that made him have a moment of like, oh, right, she's a good designer. She's completely capable of doing whatever she needs to do.
Yeah.
So I think just using your privilege, because like it probably got you into the room, I'm guessing. So use your privilege to stand up for people. Use your privilege to say the things that are going to get people to grow. And I don't know, like as a wall, right? Like have people have moments of reflection where they have to look at themselves and be like, oh, you know what? That was probably a dumb thing to say. So yeah, just use it. Like use it to have those situations kind of be awkward, knowing that like you can probably say some of that stuff and you can probably get away with it. So use that. Like,
I think also the more privilege you have, the less imposter syndrome you have. That's a hypothesis. That's a big hypothesis, but I'm gonna go with it. So like the more privilege you have, the less imposter syndrome you have. So like
I would agree with that.
A white man from a well-off family versus a woman of color from a poor
because you're
family.
Benefiting
like,
from the system, so you're not going to feel it. No one's going to tell you you don't belong here, so like what are you going to imposter?
So I think like recognizing the levels of privilege in their correlation to how someone else might be experiencing imposter syndrome in a room as well.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yay. Sorry, I was having audio issues. My computer in a whole other room was hooked up. Yes, I love what you're saying. And just to echo back, I feel like what I'm hearing is that your privilege is paired with the responsibility to counteract that privilege every day in your actions. And I feel like that, I don't know, you just really articulated a lot of things that I think I've been sort of like playing with myself, but like you were saying, like this is I think the salient problem. Like once you're in the room, you also have to acknowledge what got you in the room while then still owning the fact that you were good enough to get yourself in there. But I really like that. And I feel like that's a good way to pair, you know, those moments when I'm very aware of my privilege with, you know, maybe an action that can be more inclusive, or, you know, making sure to take a stand if one of my colleagues is in an awkward position or whatever. But yeah, thank you so much.
It's a complicated web of being human.
It is. But it's nice to get to talk out. I mean, I think even just going into those situations with the awareness, like in the moment, if you haven't done the labor of practicing what you're going to say, if you hear your coworker make a racist comment, you're not going to say something in the moment. And like I've sat there while my boss made a racist comment and I wasn't prepared, and the moment passed by before I could really process it. But now, after having gone through that, like I've done more thinking, like, what would I do? I should have done better. And how do I do better? And now if it happens again, I feel like I have the tools. So even having these conversations, it's like we're practicing the skills that will help us to, you know, conquer imposter syndrome in the world.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, to your point, and I literally just said this to Michaela before this, your only competition is the you that you were yesterday. Forget about everyone else in the room. If you take that situation and like you said, great, here was the question, here is the scenario, use design thinking, problem solve. Here's one way that I could have done it if I'm feeling nervous, right? Take it to HR. Here's a phrase that I can say that I feel confident saying. Here's the phrase I can say when I'm feeling real sassy and I am done. Like, like write down different, I think that's a great thing. Like I actually frequently do this. I plan in my head worst case scenarios for a lot of things. Weirdly enough, the meanest things people could say to me, I don't know why I'm like this, but because of it, I have a lot of very quick ideas in my head, ways to go. I have run through kidnapping scenarios several times. Again, being a woman in America, what do you do?
Oh, I thought you meant you were going to kidnap someone. Which you mean you're getting kidnapped.
I would lure them with Wendy's, right? I don't know.
Right.
I always get nervous that's how it's going to happen to me. They're going to lure me.
Yeah.
With,
I mean, it's a thing that I feel like it's a good point. Like, you're not the only one who's thought through. I mean, like, even I just think it's like all of these like things that you experience every day that you have to kind of come up with plans for. And as honestly, like women or other people from underrepresented communities, like these are the negotiations that you make every day when you walk down the street, when you drive, when you get home, when you go through work. You're kind of making this constant negotiation of like, do I have the social capital to stand up for something, or what is the situation going to be? You just kind of have to be ready for it. But I love the like getting to work it out in a shared space where you get other people's insights that can kind of help build on your own experiences.
I think what you said initially brought up an interesting point as well that we were talking about as we were preparing for this talk too. And it's like imposter syndrome can exist not only like in your professional environment, but also in having these conversations, because we were talking about like, we've experienced imposter syndrome and we felt like imposters talking about our experience. That's part of why we wanted to do research into it too, is like, even though we're talking about our experiences, we're like, well, maybe that's just us. Like we have imposter syndrome even talking about like our experiences as women in design. And I think also like when you want to stand up for other people and use your privilege, there could be a sense of imposter syndrome of like, am I allowed to do this? Can I do this? Like, what am I doing? Like, there is just this whole complicated web of feelings.
Oh, wait. I don't know the Zoom conversation anymore, but we do something in our friend group that I think is just a really interesting thing. I don't know if everyone else does this and we're late to the party. But something that I've noticed, I don't know if you know that we do this now.
You're about to say.
I'm nervous. Whenever somebody in our friend group says, can I talk about a situation that happened at work today? Or like, they open up the conversation that's happening. We validate the emotion.
Oh yeah.
Immediately, no matter what, I don't care what you're feeling, that is valid. It doesn't matter what you're feeling, it's valid.
Your feelings are your feelings.
Your feelings
someone can't
are
tell
your
you
feelings.
that you're not feeling what you're feeling.
Yeah. And I think what that did was open up a level of trust within each person to establish within themselves. So that, because by doing that, you're helping them within, because I know I've gotten more trust in myself. And I'm like, because then once we're able to talk through it, they're like, oh, this is how I would have handled it maybe. But like, now I'm in a position of like, okay, that was valid, but now we're going to grow. So and like listening to situations they've been in, yeah, now I can put myself into their mind and be like, okay, so how would I have handled that? It just creates a dialogue between so many people that we're learning and growing from each other. They're talking about experiences that then you can go home and reflect on, right? Like listen, like literally just listen to people and acknowledge them as people, validate their feelings, just shut up and listen. I know that we're saying that during a thing where I'm talking a lot, but like, you know what I'm saying.
We signed up for the webinar.
I don't even know if we're talking about imposter syndrome anymore. We're just kind of going down a rabbit hole, but
I mean, it's like you said, it's a complex facet of the whole experience for sure.
Definitely. Anyone else?
What are some of your favorite affirmations?
Oh, you're great at this.
You ready?
She has a whole list she sends me
I have
sometimes.
screenshots of my daily affirmations.
Yeah, you should just read some of those.
Okay, I'm pulling them up.
Great question.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, also background. I'm a Christian, so a lot of them have to do with Jesus, but you can definitely fill them in just for yourself as well.
I'm not religious, and she still sends them to me, and they apply.
Okay.
So.
So I am complete. Here, I'm gonna do actually the love one because this is the biggest one that's helped me. I bear with one another in love. I am fervent in love for everyone. I love others with perfect love. I am whole. I am worthy. I am capable of all things. I love unconditionally. I have mercy and walk humbly with the Holy Spirit.
You sent me a bunch before too.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find
There's
them.
I have different lists. So I'm personally working on self-love. So mine are very centric to loving. I believe that love can be given and received, but both fulfill their requirements to have love. So that's why mine are all centric around that. But I sent her some for interviewing that I also used back when I was interviewing.
Oh God. We text too many times. There's a long list somewhere. Someone ask another question and we'll come back once I find this list.
There's actually, like on this topic, there's something that I've been practicing doing, and it's accepting the good things that people say to me, like accepting compliments.
Yes.
Like if someone says like, hey, you did a really good job on that project, my first instinct is to say like, yeah, but what could I have done better, right? Like, you know, we're always constantly learning as designers. I think we all have it in us to be like, we can always improve. We can always do better next time. What can I take from this experience to make the next experience better? And it's like, sometimes you just did a good job. Just like, believe them, believe that you did a good job. If someone's like, wow, you look nice today, believe them, like let yourself have that. I think that's it's definitely a difficult thing sometimes, but that's something that I've been practicing. I don't know if that's helpful.
Adding on what Miranda said, it's funny when you get a compliment, you're like, oh no, but I didn't do well. Like I could do it better. Like there is always this feeling of oh no, like this person is just like trying to be nice to me, you know. It's not necessarily because I did a good job, you know. I can relate so much to what she said, because sometimes it happens that you are like, oh yeah, like I did good, but not enough, you know, like what I need to do it better. I totally relate to this.
And it's funny because like what I've realized through, okay, mind you, all of this is through therapy, y'all. If you don't have a therapist, and if you can't, try to look up like free resources. I know Chicago has a ton. I know I was unemployed when I started, so I didn't even have health insurance. So there's a ton of resources. But yeah, like by even saying like, oh no, that wasn't me, you're creating like trust issues within yourself, right? By saying and like showing, I love the cat, by showing yourself enough awareness, you're giving yourself love and respect, and then you're able to show up for yourself in those rooms, right? You're able to show up in like, yeah, I did do that. Good job. You know, like it's okay to give yourself compliments. You're allowed to love yourself.
I think that's something that's really hard for women to do in particular, is like brag about yourself.
Yeah.
And like accept the fact that you did a good job. I found them. These are some of my favorite ones that I've received from Mal. I am creating my career path. It will be a bumpy but worthwhile journey. My goals may be scary, but they are attainable. I am intelligent and capable enough to succeed in any endeavor which is important to me. This is my favorite one. This is like hits home for me every time. My self-worth is based on who I am and not what others think of me. Or I would add, or my design work. I think as designers, because it is subjective, and like me personally, I'm a big people pleaser. Like it's very hard to put my self-worth in what a client thinks of what I did, what my boss thinks of what I did, how many likes it got on Instagram, things like that, like validation from others. And I think it's important to remove yourself from that conversation and acknowledge that like you are valuable regardless of what you do for a living. This got really deep.
That's a really big one too, is like not letting your identity be what you do for work.
Yeah.
And I think like I know a lot of students or a lot of people who are younger, me included, like when I went through school, it was like, you know, the focus was on being a designer, being a good designer. You graduate and you're like, okay, now I need to be a designer. And then you become a designer and you're like, I'm a designer, but you're so much more. And you kind of have to like refine yourself after, you know, pulling all-nighters for 4 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just saw this in the chat and I'm going to read it if it's okay, because I really agree with this. Dasha, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Okay. I really like what you said. You said one way I have mind hacked this is I can't invalidate someone's feelings, even if it's a good compliment. If someone feels I did a good job, I have to believe them. That's so true, because we're validating our own feelings. That's a great point. I like that a lot.
That's a good nugget. I'm gonna quote you. You're gonna be Instagram quote. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's just what I say in the back of my head. Like when someone, like I think like the other week I was talking to Kat and she was looking at my portfolio and she's like, that was really good. And my brain was like, oh no, it's not that good. But I was like, wait, no, Kat feels this. I can't invalidate Kat. Like Kat actually, like she feels that. I have to validate that she feels that and say thank you and be like, thank you. You do think I did a good job.
And you took that feedback so gracefully.
Thank you.
Wow, that's a great way to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this kind of segues into my question, and that was like, what advice do you have for getting better at like internalizing success? Because for me, like, it's so hard to like, I just graduated and got an excellence award and like am being recognized at school, but like I'm like, okay, but like what's next? Like what can I do better? Like what do I need to do? Like I'm looking for a job and like all this stuff, and I like completely blew over the fact that like I'm being recognized for my work, and like my whole family's like, Bethany, like you're doing a great job, and I'm like, like yeah, okay, whatever. But like I just have such a hard time at like internalizing like any success that I have.
I very much relate to that. I think there's also a thing in the design industry. We've been talking about this really recently too, of like, I don't know if this is a thing in other professions, but I feel like there's a big thing in the design industry of name recognition of where you're working. I remember when I was getting a job after graduation, I was like, well, if I don't get like a job at the place everybody knows the name of, like this consultancy, then I'll never get this job or this job. And it's like, why are we so constrained by that too? Like that's kind of a tangential part of your question, but yeah,
So
it's
okay,
hard.
I mean,
I feel like you're better at this
yeah.
than I am. I'm still struggling with this too.
I was gonna say this is something I frequently struggle with, and it comes out by whenever I amount to any form of success. When I was freelancing this past year and running my own business, every client I got, I was like, oh, that's a fluke. That's a fluke. Wow, great, cool. Like it was like I never gave myself credit for success for what I was doing. What I think, okay, I'm going to tell you what I use to help me come around the idea of what I truly wanted. Personally, I found that I wasn't reaching success because I wasn't running for the dreams that I personally wanted, but what society was telling me to run for. This was a huge alignment in my brain. And it's taking a lot of time for me to understand what I truly want out of this life. And I used the Socratic Method. I just kept asking myself why. So I would journal. I journal very frequently to understand what's happening inside my noodle, or I voice memo myself. Michaela knows this. I have voice memos on my phone of me just talking in circles. And I painted a very clear picture of what success looks like in my current state at that moment. I was like, this is success to me. At that time, it was running a female only, owned, that'd be I guess female owned and like run, but like, I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter anymore. I wanted to run a design firm, and that's what I wanted. That was the goal I was running after. And I kept asking myself why. I just had to I did it, I think like 5 different levels to get to the core reason of what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I realized that it wasn't I came to realize that it wasn't actually a good enough why. It wasn't a good enough why that when the success happened, it justified everything I was going through. When I came to find out and then started asking myself questions of what makes you feel happy, and recording this, what makes me feel whole,
Makes you feel like satisfied.
when,
in your
yeah,
job.
when I started recording my day, I get like, you guys are learning so much about me. I give myself
There's a lot
smiley
going on in here.
I give myself smiley faces or frowny faces depending on the day I have, and I record what made me feel whole each day. And what that allows me to do is find commonalities and patterns of what makes me happy and what makes me feel successful. And then I try to then plan my life according to smiley faces in my journal. So some of these things are me time and cultivating time for my friends. Of course, working, right? Because I do get a lot of fulfillment out of that. But what it did was like help me understand what success means to me. And now it's an obtainable success that I get a lot of satisfaction that I sit with. I understand that this might not be helpful at all because I don't know personally.
I think like a lot of things that what you're saying though can be universal, like defining what success means to you, like, and understanding why you think that means you're being successful. So like success to you might mean getting a job at one of the big firms, but success could also mean getting the excellence award that you just got or something like that. And there can be different, yeah, that's awesome. There can be different levels of success within that. And also I think an important thing of what Mal is talking about that I also am personally learning to do right now is understanding how I define success versus how the world wants me to define success, because I'm realizing success to me means like doing work that I find fulfilling, not necessarily working at the place with the best name recognition, something like that. So I think like it is an internal thing that you just have to sit with for a while. Like there's not really a quick answer, unfortunately.
I wish I could sell you like a nice pill. No, not a pill, sorry. Not like a nice like book or something about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something you just have to sit with and understand. And also like finding people that will help you celebrate successes is important too.
Yeah. Even if it's small things. Like I know when I was in between clients, I had to get a job at Target. And this girl, I came running down the hall. Do you remember? I was like freaking out because I got a job. I was so happy that I had like a financial income, and we celebrate. Like, I think what I started doing was celebrating all of the wins, not just the big wins. I started celebrating the days that I drank enough water. I started celebrating the days.
You made it through the day.
I made it through the day. This is awesome. Like, I think
cry.
You have to almost get like comfortable with celebrating.
Yeah.
So that when those big celebrations come, there's like not that like expectation to celebrate, because you're like, I'm so used to celebrating anyways, because my day is full of celebrations. Like, I'm really proud of myself today for getting out of bed, because that is hard for me sometimes. And so I think like when you just become very normal to celebrating the small wins, the big wins, it becomes easier to just celebrate everything.
I have a question. I really liked what you said earlier about sort of like combating imposter syndrome by being super honest about your skill set and also your ability to learn on the job. But how would you handle working with someone or several people who sort of have the opposite of imposter syndrome, like the overly confident man? And so like their overconfidence kind of sheds this harsh light on your honesty, and it makes you seem less confident, but in reality you're just very realistic and introspective and honest. So like, how do you handle that?
That's a great question.
You guys, my answers for everything are to ask them questions. I'm not kidding you. So if people are mean to me, I give them questions of self-reflection. This happens very frequently because I am so like, I don't know the answer. Or I throw it on the user. Legitimately, they'll be like, how should we do this? And I'm like, oh, what does user testing say? Like I take myself out of it, because ultimately, right, designers are like caravans for the user. Like we are interpreters for the user. Like we're trying to find the commonality between business and product.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Do you mean imposter syndrome in terms of like physical skills or more just like, I don't know how to phrase this. Because like there's a difference between not knowing like how to solve a design problem versus like not knowing how to do CAD.
Oh,
I don't know how to phrase
that's a
that
good
question.
I think it's a little of everything, like, because in any situation, like, even if I wouldn't know a certain thing in CAD, like, I would be able to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, you would.
It's like, it's like tough to narrow it down because it is such a it's a universal way of carrying yourself that like comes up in pretty much every situation.
I think part of it is also just like, I think there's a difference between being confident and being arrogant, and recognizing someone that's being arrogant versus like you're just confident in the fact that you can figure out how to do things. Like it's clear from how you asked the question and how you just answered my question, like being confident in that even if you don't know everything, you can figure it out because you're a smart, capable human being, versus someone that's like, I don't know. I think it's problematic when people think they know everything, because as designers, like you don't know everything. And if someone is like what Mal was saying, if a user comes in and is like, you're doing this wrong, or like someone gives you feedback and you're not willing to take that into consideration, I think that's way more problematic than like not knowing how to do something in CAD. So I think like it seems like a tricky situation to navigate, but I think it goes back a little bit to just knowing within yourself that you're confident. And it's hard to say it doesn't matter what they think, because if they're like your boss or your superior, it does.
Yeah.
This is a really hard question to answer.
Well, I think as well, I'm not, I like the answer I'm about to give you, I'm not gonna lie, it sucks, but it's honestly what I do. So when I'm realizing that we're 2 minutes over. Is this okay? Does anybody have any more?
I'm assuming people will just leave.
Okay, yeah. If you have to
be here
leave,
anymore,
Miranda,
and if they don't want to listen to us ramble,
let us know.
This is great. We're great.
So generally when this happens, in like the UX world, I don't know, I think I experience this a little bit more potentially in like the service industry kind of experience portion of the job, because what is the answer? Nobody knows the answer, but there's always someone in the room that's like, this is what we're doing. And I'm like giving away my secrets. I always just in a very smiley, approachable mood, I'm just like, yeah, can you tell me why you think that? Great. Can you tell me more? And I ask why so many
like
times.
That annoying kid.
Like, and I am
why?
that annoying kid,
Why?
but I just try to take the annoyance out of it. I'm like, oh, why? Oh, why do you think that? Why do you think this is the best answer? Why do you think? And 9 times out of 10, at some point, their answer becomes flawed. I'm not saying that's always the reason. Sometimes they actually know what they're doing, and I'm like, I'm so glad I asked why, because I look stupid. But like at the times where like maybe they were throwing out a really bad answer, usually there comes a point in the why segment question where whoever was saying that is like, actually, you know what, this isn't working, or actually you're right, that's not going to work here. Or in group meetings, other experts in the room or other people in the room are like, oh, well, you know what, we tried doing that 2 years ago. You weren't at the company yet, but we tried that and it failed because of X, Y, and Z. Great. Now we have 3 different reasons and 3 different approaches to going through this problem that we weren't talking about before. And then the other approach, if like that's really not working and I know what I'm saying is correct, find your champion in the room. I don't know who it is. Find your person in the room. Actually, just in general, find your people at your environment of like where you're working that are going to listen to you and help you form these ideas. And like get your soundboards and like start running through this and say like, hey, I know that this option was brought up. I think that this is another option that we really need to be looking into. And it's a lot of work, but like, form that full-fledged idea. Like I take the time to build presentations around this so that when I give them the idea, it's not just like hey, this is what I'm thinking, but hey, this is what I'm thinking. Here's X, Y, and Z of why this works. Here's the opportunities. Here's the gaps. I'm not saying it's great because yes, I do have to do maybe a little bit more work when someone else can just say it. we can't talk about that right now. It's a whole nother conversation, but like just doing that, that's kind of two different ways I try to approach those. Because even if I don't know the answer, I've realized that by just asking why, generally other people in the room didn't know why either. And then once we get down to taking like to a common language set that everyone's on and us playing the field that everyone's at, then we really start to like grind and move and work in a way that like we weren't doing before. Don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, I feel like all of our answers to things are just like real roundabout ways to get to a story, but
yeah.
Could I add something to that, Mel?
Yeah.
So I think something that I found recently, and this was a very recent discovery, is like playing into the imposter syndrome thing. I'm a younger designer. I work with a lot of engineers who have been at my company for more than 10 years, right? They clearly know what they're doing. And so sometimes they'll bring an insight to a project meeting and they'll say, the client feels this way, or this is how the patient's going to perceive this. And I say like, oh, how do you know that? Like, did I miss that conversation? And they'll say, oh, it's just a hunch. Like, that's a great start. Exactly. I think we should probably get user feedback. And so I think that plays into the idea of like, you know, before I would just think like, oh, I didn't know that the client would feel this way. And this person said that the client would feel this way. I just must not know what I'm doing. I'm just new. But I think someone put in the chat, the person that asks the most questions wins. I think it also helps you kind of like take ownership of what a designer is there for, right? We're the champions for the users.
That's yeah. I mean, exactly what you just said. 90, like, I don't know. I really feel that. Great. That was, just let Miranda answer all questions from this point out. That was a wonderful.
I just want to echo the like user as like the thing that you're advocating for. I think it can be a lot easier to like get through some of those tougher conversations if you're like advocating for the user rather than your own opinion, because then you take yourself out of the subject. Like the subjectivity of design is so broad that we're not like, I like this concept, I like that concept. It doesn't matter. That's not how we evaluate what a good concept is. You may not be the user. We're not putting racing stripes on this thing for moms. I'm sorry, we're not doing it. And so I think it's just like the matter of divorcing yourself. So it's like, would your user, and that's a real story also. I can see Mallory cracking up.
I would love to hear that story sometime.
Oh my God, it was amazing. It was this video game console that was supposed to be like for families, family friendly. And the guy was like, I love Ferraris. Can we get Ferraris in there? Can we do racing stripes, maybe carbon fiber? Amazing. It's like, well, I don't know. We'll have to ask the moms.
Oh my God.
We'll do some user testing.
The carbon fiber, seriously.
Right. And you can just let it die on the vine when you do user testing, or if you say, from the user's perspective, I think that this might be maybe not the best solution. Or actually, if you look at the mood board that we made, and you can use your own work as evidence, but then then they're not like tearing you and your opinion down. You're just disagreeing about the path on the project, which to what Vicky said in the comments about communication, I mean, it's just like, I think it really all ties together. It's a matter of, removing, I think, your personal element out of it. But anyway.
Also, like, who the F decides what good means? Like, the user should decide what good means. Good does not have a definition. That means nothing. When someone's like, well, I don't like this, or this is good, I'm like, that's not helpful at all. Can you please tell me why it's good, why it's bad? Like, I hate when people say that. That's just a side note for giving good critique, but.
And I think you touched on critique. Important thing, that like, design
helpful critique.
that should be a lens talk. Someone tell us how to get helpful critiques.
Oh, I love this.
We should get in that.
Anyway,
I think you touched on something really important though, that like design is full of ego, and so if you can put yourself in a position to take out the ego, do it, because then you're gonna get to the real problem for the user. I know I'm currently, same tactics. I'm currently in a position where my manager, right? So like there's a lot of different inner workings to this relationship. And they were going through user testing scenarios, which ones we're going to test. He's very adamant that he wants one in there. I'm very adamant that this is not a smart decision for us to continue down. But I have faith in the user that they're gonna, like, I don't even have to talk about it because I have faith in the user. And so I was like, yeah, let's test it, because
You can't argue with
I'm not
that.
gonna, yeah, first off, I'm not gonna argue with my boss. Like, I'm not gonna do that. Well, not my, whatever. I get nervous. The people that are higher above me in command chain, I'm not gonna like argue with them. And if I trust what's happening, Kayla, exactly. You can't argue with data. I'm going to take all the ego out. I'm going to take it's not between you and me. This is not an argument between people. This is what the user wants. So let's bring it back to data. Let's put it on paper so that when we go back to having this conversation, it's about what's happening on the paper and the numbers that we got back, not about who was right. Because I feel like that's ultimately what happens, right? People get very attached to their ideas and you become arguing with, are you right or am I right? When that's not the conversation, it's what's best for the user, right? Like, we're two parents, we're making this kid. I don't know if that was inappropriate. Don't bring that into the workplace. But like, you have this kid, like, what's best for the kid, right? Oh my gosh. Don't take that, y'all. Do not take that. That was not
Wrong
safe for
analogy.
work. Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have questions?
I think that
Do-
depends,
I mean,
it depends on the
Go
client.
ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna
Can
say, I
I-
think it depends on the client if you're gonna make a kid with them or not.
Move right past that one. Remember how you said this lives on the internet forever?
This does look okay. Oh my goodness. I know we're going to watch this in like 20 years. Please don't fire me. Okay.
do
I
have
mean,
a
I just
question.
wanted to, oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, sorry,
No,
Karina.
I've talked way
Keep
too
on
much. You
going.
go. Nope.
No, I just want to add one thing on what you guys were talking about and do my final question. When you were saying about like, oh, this person has an opinion for everything or knows everything, it's usually the person that is putting their personal experience on the project. It's the person that it's being personal at the end of the day, you know? So talking about a little bit about this, I think there is a problem, not a problem, but like something that we have seen happening in Instagram. And we talked about this before of people jumping into conversations and canceling people just by saying that they know the truth or they know what it's right or wrong. And I want to know about like what you guys think about this culture and like what it's beneficial or not for us, because I agree that like yes, there are some assholes there saying a lot of bullshit that we need to like figure out what to do, but there's also people that can be educated and they're just like they just don't know, or they had a different experience than us on the words and their experiences, and they don't know what it is that we go through as a syndrome imposter or like all the other things that we would do because we are women, you know. So I want to hear about you guys and what do you think about you girls, what do you think about this canceling culture?
I personally hate cancel culture. I think it's rather toxic. I think a lot of things has to do with motivation. So like there are some people that are just going to be assholes, but there are people that are just like they just don't know, and you don't really know that until you engage with those people. And so I don't think it's fair to just shut down everybody that maybe said something they shouldn't have or did something they shouldn't have. I think it's important to have a conversation and create a space where you can have dialogue about things, because if we just shut down everybody that we don't automatically agree with, we're just going to create an even bigger division. And that's ultimately not going to help anybody, because then it's just like continuously fighting with people and not getting anywhere. And the ultimate goal is progress. And so I think like creating a culture that keeps people accountable rather than cancels them is what we should be aiming towards. And like creating a culture where people feel like we don't want to encourage people to be assholes, but like if they do something that is asshole-ish, to be able to like help them understand maybe why that was wrong and educate them and help them educate themselves, because we also don't want to bear the full burden of educating every person that doesn't know what they're talking about. But
yeah, I mean, all these, I don't know if you guys are in the chats, but all of these are great points. So creating a learning culture and a growth culture. Because also that means if you are accepting others and like wanting them to grow, you yourself have to be ready to take that, because you're not right all the time. I don't know if you think you're right, you're not, but like you're growing as well. And so I know there's times that I've been called out and they're like, you're walking in a ton of white privilege. And I'm like, you know what? Thank you. And then we have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And it's great because now it's like, oh, cool. So not only am I learning, but then when my friends do that, I'm like, hey, actually, that's not cool because I was in that situation a week ago. And this is like how we can all be better humans. And like it creates opportunities to like continue the learning.
Yeah. I think cancel culture just shuts things down. Like, we're terrified of getting canceled. And like just going into this talk, we were like, okay, we need to be very careful about everything we're saying so that we don't get canceled. And it's like, I don't think we said anything controversial, but it's just like,
except do not procreate with your employer.
I think it just creates like a toxic mindset and a toxic environment where people don't want to speak up and they don't want to start conversations because they're afraid of getting canceled. And like the loudest people are sometimes the most problematic. So I don't know.
And I think though as well, I don't want this to come off hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And I mean that as if somebody is doing something wrong and you have come to them and you're like, hey, this is a better way, and they continue to do it, all bets are off. You are now accountable for your actions. I am no longer going to coddle this. I don't want to say coddle, but like I'm not. Now we're approaching this situation in a different way, right? Now the severity of your actions way more because not only are you doing something wrong, you understand it's wrong and you have known better and you're not choosing the better route. In which case, those steps look very different for each scenario, right? And you need like depending on the severity of what they're doing, they need to be held accountable because we are past the day and age where we can let people continue on when they know better. And when we live with the internet and there's so many ways to educate yourself and to take self accountability for your own actions, like
I think we should trademark accountability culture. I like this term we just coined.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. I was trying to do the trademark symbol on Mac.
Well, I think it was like Kayla. Somebody said something about like creating a safe space. And I think, like just doing that. Oh yeah, sorry, we can go.
Yeah, you can tell us to stop talking, whatever, because this is like literally just what we do all day anyway, is just talk about things like this. So
that's a great question though. Yeah, I think
it's become such a big thing with Instagram recently, and I'm just
I also think as well, not even Instagram, but obviously like very apparent social everything structures. You catch more bees with honey is the way I view it. If I want people to grow past whatever is holding them back to being like a really rude person, I'm going to be able to converse with you more if we talk about it and I'm sweet. But if you start combating assholeness with assholeness, you're not going to get like, where are you going to go? Right? Like, how are we progressively going to step forward together? And sometimes that just means sending them different like, you know, it doesn't always have to be like okay, can you meet at 3? We're going to talk through why everything you said was wrong. You know what? Take baby steps with these people, right? Maybe send them a couple learning resources so they can start to because like you have to, I mean, just like when you're doing when you're doing a product and problem solving that, what's the problem? Someone's being a bigot. How do we solve this problem? Well, we have to study the user. Is the user gonna be offended if I come at him this way? I'm sorry, I don't want to gender this person. This person that was wrong. If this person is feeling some kind of way, like, are they gonna feel offended if we come at them this way? Okay, what about this way? And then like something's gonna resonate when you start to understand that person, and then that's gonna be your path to success. And it might look different for different situations and different people.
I think you also just have to recognize when it's time to like, let that
if it's taking a toll on you, then just tap out. Don't, it's not your, like, you're good. It's not your job.
I think also opening a space for conversation in the workplace is important because sometimes people don't feel that they can have these difficult conversations. And so you being the first to talk about it allows them to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Mel and Michaela, you two brought up a good point earlier about going into like a meeting or something and always having like a point person, having someone who is going to have your back in that meeting. Could you two talk a little bit about that a little bit more? If either of you have done that, and I guess tips for the rest of us to do that.
I think for me personally, like the way that I've created that type of a person at my work is by having those open conversations like Kayla just brought up. Like when I first started at my job, I did not feel comfortable talking about things like that. And now that I've been there for 3 years, I'm like, everybody knows where I stand on issues. Like I'm the first one to say something. Like I feel like I'm constantly educating my coworkers on like what's even happening in the world. And so because they know that that is an important thing to me, and like I've reiterated over and over again that like this happens and this is a real thing, I have confidence in the fact that if we're in a room and someone says something towards me or about me, that like those people have my back because we've created that kind of a rapport. I think it's hard if you don't have people that necessarily are as open or receptive to like hearing that type of thing. I'm trying to think of like how you could even combat that if you don't have someone in the room with you.
So I think that's currently where I'm at because I'm in such a new role. I have not established partners in any of the rooms I'm walking. Well, no, we have a diversity person. So if I really need someone, I can call him. But I haven't established those partners yet. And there have been a couple situations that I'm like, yeah, like, you know, and right now I am choosing to be quiet. I'm not going to say this is great advice, guys. I'm just going to tell you what I've been doing. I've been taking note of what's been happening, and trying to think through like, okay, what's, again, like going back to earlier conversation, how can I better address this? How can I show up for myself next time? And then I'm like looking for these people, like who are the people that I can start to look to in these rooms that are catching on to my cues, because I have a very expressive face. It's not hard to know when something probably hit me weird, because I'm probably going to go like I'm going to make a physical reaction. And so some people have caught on, and I'm like, you know, now I'm kind of like, oh, are you an, you know, are you an you know? And in the meantime, I'm talking to my mentors. I have established some truly amazing relationships. And until I can get someone in the room, I'm asking the people that I trust outside the room who have also been in these experiences. And I'm asking them like, what did you do? I don't know. I think this is something I'm facing a lot more in corporate than I am in agency life. But I guess maybe there's more to it than I maybe experienced before. I don't know. I think I lived it a little. I think I just didn't know what was happening before. But now that I'm aware of it and I'm like seeing everything, I have my mentors outside the room that are helping me right now inside the room. And so taking time to sit with them, talk through different scenarios, ask their opinion on things, and grow through that.
Yeah, I think Kat, I like the comment that you put in the chat about building up social capital, so that you can speak up or have people to speak up for you. I think I just saw a cat.
She just keeps sitting right in front of me. Sorry, everyone.
You're fine. It's cute.
Never apologize.
Until you build up that social capital, I think it's really hard, and just like you kind of have to show up for yourself, which is even more difficult.
I think, to your point, building up that social capital sometimes means not fighting every battle. It is so crucial because like we have to imagine the long game, right? Like we are running a marathon, not a sprint. And if you want this true change, you have to like really start to use like discernment to understand like, okay, what, like when this happens, what's this battle? What's an appropriate response? How can I, like, you know, what's my energy level right now? Honestly, if you're exhausted and your tank is empty, this might not be a battle you can take today. If you don't have the capital or the people in the room to back you and you're on the verge of getting fired, again, might not be the time to, like, you have to like assess the situation. And sometimes it's not always I can talk up every time.
Yeah.
But how are you preparing yourself in those times so that when the time comes, you're ready and you're down and you can strike with more impact, right? Because what we want is impact.
Yeah, I hate that it has to be this way, but it's also like a game of chess a little bit. And like the things that you do are strategic and the relationships that you build are strategic, like to your career and to also like dismantling this whole system that we're a part of. Oh, I like what you
Patriarchy. Oh yeah. Yeah, put on your own mask before helping others.
Yeah, for real.
Sometimes it's like this like 4D chess of trying to strategically pick, like I was like, well, I'm not going to fight about coronavirus restrictions because I want to fight about diversity instead. Right. It's like one of these things is more temporary than the other, but like what a choice to have to make.
I'm reading a book right now called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And it's a great book. I would recommend it to everybody. She brings up a really good point that I hadn't thought of that I think also applies a little bit to this conversation and allyship in general is like when you start a conversation with someone you don't know beforehand if they're an ally, if they're a racist, if they're somewhere in the middle, like you don't know who you're talking to necessarily. And so it can be like a scary thing to bring up when you don't know all the characters in the room. You don't know all the characters in this game of chess that we're playing. And so it's like, you have to be careful in the moves that you make and the way that you're saying things and the people that you choose to bring this up with in order to like keep yourself safe in this game. Like, and I hate that it has to be a game. And I hate that we're using a game as an analogy, but that's kind of what it is.
Because you have to think too, what's best for the movement is you being
in the game,
right? If you do something to take yourself out of the game, now you're no longer of use. And so like kind of what Kayla's saying, like, how okay, I know that I need to stay employed to change the game, right? Because money has, what do we know? Money has power. I'm in the room. I'm making choices. So how do I stay in the room, right? So now you have to start figuring everything out and understanding your role in it, right? How do I start navigating these different rooms?
Yeah.
And then honestly too, like, I mean, to her point again, like, it is great when you like the people you work with, but when you don't, they did not hire you to be friends with these people. They hired you to get a job done and done well. That is why you were hired, is to profit the larger organization. We can talk about capitalism later. So when that happens, you, like, again, like, I don't know, like, you're not, if you're disagreeing with someone, it's okay. It's okay that not everyone likes you. It's okay if not everyone agrees with what you're saying. That's fine. It's a hard pill to swallow. I still am like, I'm a huge people pleaser. So that is something that I'm daily trying to remember. But it's okay. It's okay. Not everyone has to like you. Not everyone has to agree with what you're saying. Just say it. Like, if you're going to feel better when you are true to yourself over being true to someone else.
I think that goes back to like just being open and transparent about things. I like what Miranda put in the chat, like the situation also changes how you respond. I think like that's a good point to make in the bigger picture of how you're doing this. Like, also you have to consider what's appropriate and like ultimately be a professional in a professional setting. And that might look differently in like when I'm with my coworkers, like it's very relaxed, but like I wouldn't say those types of things if I was in a meeting with like a client that I didn't know, because that's just not a professional thing to do.
Even when we work together, like how we are now, if that client saw us, they would probably be like, what? Because like we're like, oh yes, would you like to take the next segment? I don't know why I got a British accent.
Standing up,
but like, yeah, we were like, oh, and would you like to take the next segment of approach? Oh yes, thank you so much. And like in real life, I'm like, yo, great, thanks, good.
We're like sitting on my couch.
Yeah. So yeah. It is, yeah, and it yes. If you guys don't,
Thank you for naming all the things we're talking about, Kat. You're just like, okay, I'm going to summarize this.
Is a blessing and a curse. You have to like weaponize code switching, educate yourself. It's where.
No, I like.
I thought you said. oh yeah, like, you know, you like, it's annoying that we, again, okay, I don't want to get like political. Okay, so you have to show up, right? And catch the bees with honey. Catch the bees with honey. Is it annoying? Is it exhausting? Heck yes. But get into the hive and kill the queen. You know what I mean? Like, do it. Like, it sucks, but like, especially if you have privilege, I guess this is more for people with privilege of like any sorts, do it. Infiltrate the hive and kill the queen. You know what I mean? Like, use it to get yourself into the room, because once you're in the room, you can be like, hey buddies, come here. And then you can start getting others into the room. And then 2 years down the line, guess what? That room looks totally different. Right. And that's you redecorated the hive. Like, and I think it's one of those things that like in its root of what code switching is, it has a very problematic past. Like that should not have to be the case. So how do we dismantle that case? Right. We change the room so that we don't all have to be constantly code switching to get a point across in a business meeting. We can just talk like humans solving a problem one-on-one, you know? Yeah. Like this.
Anyway, I feel like we've just been doing like an open forum podcast for the past hour and a half. So hopefully like some nugget in that was helpful. I know like this is just stuff we talk about all the time between the two of us. So we love being able to just have this conversation with everyone. I'm going to drop in the chat Women in Design Instagram and website if you guys want to follow along. We like have lots of events and put blogs out and stuff like that. So if you want to follow along with what we're doing, a lot of the stuff revolves around these kind of tough conversations. So
as well as if you are not in the unified Discord, this is a Discord completely of anyone who is affected by gender inequality. Get in there as well.
We didn't found it. We just love.
No, we just love them. And then, I mean, allyship. There are so many. I hope you guys are already all connected to these like wonderful platforms, but there's a lot of really great people doing.
And follow Kat and T that started Design Allyship on Instagram.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of
they
other
have
things
great nuggets.
Obviously, Advanced Design, like they let us come on here and just
I mean,
talk about random things for an hour.
Advanced Design is a great organization.
Mallory,
Everything you're doing with
Mallory, Mallory, could you repeat what you just said? What was that the earlier organization or source that you mentioned?
I put it in the chat.
Yeah. Kat, do you want to drop the Design Allyship one in there too?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who aren't aware, that's like a toolkit of resources to save you the effort of explaining the basics of equality to your coworkers.
Oh shoot. This is so fun. People are funny.
This has been amazing. I feel like this is a really good point to kind of wrap things up. Thank you two so much for coming on and sharing your awesome presentation. It looked really good. You both look amazing. This was awesome. The conversation was
we got to shout out. If our presentation looked good, it's because of this girl. Well, she's below us.
Miranda is also on our Women in Design board, and she is helping us rebrand everything. And so all of the lovely colors and design that you saw is all Miranda. So
round of applause for her.
And thanks for
go off mute.
Oh, now I got to practice taking the compliment, just like I said earlier.
Full circle, baby.
Full circle. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone so much. This is going to be on YouTube soon, which actually, I'm going to stop the recording right now.